So for whoever wonders what would happen if you don't match properly your generator head, in which case in this case this is a 100 kV drone motor, and it's supposed to charge a 12-volt battery for a truck, and I'm using a GX31 engine. And what happens is, when I start it up, the motor will make depending on the RPM, basically for 1000 RPM, because it's a 100 kV motor. On 1000 RPM it would make 10 volts. On 100 RPM would make 1 volt. On 1000 would make 10 volts. So to charge a 12-volt battery, that would mean that you need to run this engine at 1200 RPM, but these engines will not run at 1200 RPM because they're too small. They idle at 4000, and they produce power from well, actually you can get them to idle at probably like 2500 best thing, but they don't produce any power at that. They produce their power at 5000 RPM. So when you start this generator up, no matter what RPM you give it, 3000, 4000, 5000, it will make 30 volts, 40 volts, or 50 volts. And what happens when you hook it up to a 12-volt battery, the voltage will have to drop. The battery forces the engine to drop to 12 volts, and the 12 volts, that's 1200 RPM, and at 1200 RPM there is no torque on this motor, so the motor just dies. Now what the solution is, I don't know exactly. I think you could get a buck boost converter that takes 30, 40, 50 volts, and then make it so it puts out 14 volts, and you would have the added advantage that you can get the buck boost converter with a constant current adjustment. But as it is, you cannot directly connect it because it just kills the engine automatically. It forces it down to 1200 RPM, to 12 volts, because the battery is 12 volts. It forces it down to 12 volts because if the generator head, this electric motor would spin faster, and that would make 13 volts, but the battery has to stays at 13, 14, so it forces it down in the RPM range where the engine just dies. So if you want to make a little generator, you kind of have to match the RPM at which the engine produces power with a generator head that at that RPM produces exactly the voltage you want. Otherwise, when you connect it to charge something, it's just gonna kill the motor. Like it's not gonna be able to put out anything. It's just gonna die. And I can show you, but it's a bit of a hassle. So we got 50, 60 volts, and when I connect it to the battery, just dies.